This is the first of the Peter Hitchens articles, which I mentioned earlier, which was published on the 22nd of March, and these are his words, not mine. But it does make for interesting reading. So this was published in the Mail on Sunday, 21st of March. He obviously updated it. Peter Hitchens is shutting down Britain with unprecedented curbs on ancient liberties. Really the best answer. Our columnist is renowned for independent thinking. It will enrage many, I bet. But here he offers a highly controversial personal view. We'll miss out the first bit about the doctor. It never, ever does any harm to question decisions which you think are wrong. If they're right, then no harm will be done. They will be able to deal with your questions. If they are in fact wrong, you could save everyone a lot of trouble. So here I am asking bluntly, is the close down of the country the right answer to the coronavirus? I'll be accused of undermining the NHS and threatening public health and all kinds of other conformist rubbish. But I ask you to join me, because if we have this wrong, we have a great deal to lose. I don't just address this plea to my readers. I think my fellow journalists should ask the same questions. I think MPs of all parties should ask them when they are urged tomorrow to pass into law a frightening series of restrictions on ancient liberties and vast increases in police and state powers. And of course that law came in last Friday. Did you know that the government and opposition had originally agreed that there would not even be a vote on these measures? Even Vladimir Putin might hesitate before doing anything so blatant. I think there's been a change since then. I think they've got lockdown, and if you overstep the mark, I think the punishment is up to 7 years in jail. So that's not really relevant. To continue. If there is no serious rebellion against this plan in the Commons, then I think we can commemorate tomorrow, March the 23rd, 2020, as the day Parliament died. Yet as far as I can see, the population cares more about running out of lavatory paper. Praise must go to David Davis and Chris Bryant, two MPs who have bravely challenged this measure. It may also be the day our economy perished. The incessant coverage of health scares and supermarket panics has obscured the dire news coming each hour from the stock markets and the money exchanges. The wealth that should pay our pensions is shrivelling as share values fade and fall. The pound sterling has lost a huge part of its value. Governments all over the world are resorting to risky, frantic measures which make Jeremy Corbyn's magic money tree look like sober, sound finance. Much of this has been made far worse by the general shutdown of the planet on the pretext of the coronavirus scare. However bad this virus is, and I will come to that, the feverish panic on the world trading floors is at least as bad. And then there is the Johnson government's stumbling retreat from reason into fear. At first Mr Johnson was true to himself and resisted wild demands to close down the country. But bit by bit he gave in. The schools were to stay open. Now they are shutting, with miserable consequences for this year's A-level cohort. Not just A-levels, all children. To go on. Cafes and pubs were to be allowed to stay open, but now that's over. On this logic, shops and supermarkets must be next, with everybody forced to rely on overstrained delivery vans. And that will presumably be followed by hairdressers, dry cleaners and shoe repairers. Are there such things as shoe repairers these days? Continuing. How long before we need passes to go out into the streets, as in any other banana republic? As for the grotesque bullying powers to be created on Monday, I can only tell you that you will hate them like poison by the time they are imposed on you. All the crudest weapons of despotism, the curfew, the presumption of guilt and the power of arbitrary arrest are taking shape in the midst of what used to be a free country. And we who like to boast of how calm we are in a crisis seem to despise our ancient hard-fought freedom and actually want to rush into the warm, firm arms of Big Brother. Imagine police officers forcing you to be screened for a disease and locking you up for 48 hours if you object. I mean, is this China or Britain? Think how this power could be used against literally anybody. The bill also gives ministers the authority to ban mass gatherings. It will enable police and public health workers to place restrictions on a person's movements and travels, activities, and contact with others. Many court cases will now take place via a video link, and if a coroner suspects somebody has died of coronavirus, there will be no inquest. They say this is temporary. They always do. Well, is it justified? There is a document from a team at Imperial College in London which is being used to justify it. It warns of vast numbers of deaths if the country is not subjected to a medieval curfew. But this is all speculation. It claims, in my view quite wrongly, that the coronavirus has comparable lethality to the Spanish flu of 1918, which killed at least 17 million people and mainly attacked the young. What can one say to this? In a pungent letter to the Times last week, a leading vet, Dick Sibley, cast doubt on the brilliance of the Imperial College scientists, saying that his heart sank when he learned they were advising the government, calling them a team of doommongers. He said their advice on the 2001 foot and mouth outbreak led to what I believe to be the unnecessary slaughter of millions of healthy cattle and sheep, until they were overruled by the then Chief Scientific Advisor, Sir David King. He added, "I hope that Boris Johnson, Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance show similar wisdom. They must ensure that measures are proportionate, balanced and practical." Avoidable deaths are tragic, but each year there are already many deaths, especially among the old, from complications of flu leading to pneumonia. The Department of Health and Social Care, the DHSC, tells me that the number of flu cases and deaths due to flu-related complications in England alone averages 17,000 a year. This varies greatly each winter, ranging from 1,692 deaths last season, which is 2018-19, to 28,330 deaths in 2014-15. The DHSC notes that many of those who die from these diseases have underlying health conditions, as do almost all the victims of coronavirus so far, here and elsewhere. As the experienced and knowledgeable doctor who writes under the pseudonym MD in the left-wing magazine Private Eye wrote at the start of the panic, in the winter of 2017-18, more than 50,000 excess deaths occurred in England and Wales, largely unnoticed. Good Lord. Nor is it just respiratory diseases that carry people off too soon. In the government's table of deaths considered avoidable, it lists 31,307 deaths from cardiovascular diseases in England and Wales for 2013, the last year for which they could give me figures. This, largely the toll of unhealthy lifestyles, was out of a total of 114,740 avoidable deaths that year. To put all these figures into perspective, please note that every human being in the United Kingdom suffers from a fatal condition, being alive. About 1,600 people die every day in the UK for one reason or another. A similar figure applies in Italy, and a much larger one in China. The coronavirus deaths, whilst distressing and shocking, are not so numerous as to require the civilised world to shut down transport and commerce nor to surrender centuries-old liberties in an afternoon. We are warned of supposedly devastating death rates, but at least one expert, John Ioannidis, is not so sure. He is a professor of medicine, of epidemiology and population health, of biomedical data science and of statistics at Stanford University in California. He says the data are utterly unreliable because so many cases are going unrecorded. He warns this evidence fiasco creates tremendous uncertainty about the risk of dying from COVID-19. Reported case fertility rates, like the official 3.4% rate from the World Health Organization, cause horror and are meaningless. In only one place, aboard the cruise ship Diamond Princess, has an entire closed community been available for study. And the death rate there, just 1%, is distorted because so many of those aboard were elderly. The real rate, adjusted for a wide age range, could be as low as 0.05% and as high as 1%. As Professor Ioannidis says, that huge range markedly affects how severe the pandemic is and what should be done. A population-wide case fertility rate of 0.05% is lower than seasonal influenza. If that is the true rate, locking down the world with potentially tremendous social and financial consequences may be totally irrational. It's like an elephant being attacked by a house cat. Frustrated and dying to avoid the cat, the elephant accidentally jumps off a cliff and dies. Epidemic disasters have been predicted many times before and have not been anything like as bad as feared. The former editor of the Times, Simon Jenkins, recently listed these unfulfilled scares. Bird flu did not kill the predicted millions in 1997. In 1999 it was mad cow disease and its human variable CJD, which was predicted to kill 500,000. Fewer than 200 died, in fact, from it in the UK. The first SARS outbreak of 2003 was reported as having a 25% chance of killing tens of millions and being worse than AIDS. In 2006, another bout of bird flu was declared, the first pandemic of the 21st century. There were similar warnings in 2009 that swine flu could kill 65,000. It didn't. It actually killed about 500. Continuing. The Council of Europe described the hyping of the 2009 pandemic as one of the greatest medical scandals of the century. Well, we shall no doubt see. But while I see very little evidence of a pandemic and much more of a panicdemic, I can witness on my daily round the slow strangulation of dozens of small businesses near where I live and work, and the catastrophic collapse of a flourishing society. All these things brought on by a government policy made out of fear and speculation rather than thought. Much that is closing may never open again. The time lost to school children and university students, in debt for courses for which they have simply ceased to be taught, is irrecoverable, just as the jobs which are being wiped out will not reappear when the panic at last subsides. We are told that we must emulate Italy or China, but there is no evidence that the flailing despotic measures taken in these countries reduce the incidence of coronavirus. The most basic error in science is to assume that because B happens after A, that B was caused by A. That comes up in climate change as well, which is just as controversial. Continuing on. There may just be time to reconsider. I know that many of you long for some sort of coherent opposition to be voiced. The people who are paid to be opposition do not seem to wish to earn their rations, so it is up to the rest of us. I despair that so many in the commentariat and politics obediently accept what they are being told. I have lived long enough and travelled far enough to know that authority is often wrong and cannot always be trusted. This is not fun. This is our future, and if I did not lift my voice to speak up for it now, even if I do it quite alone, I should consider that I was not worthy to call myself English or British or a journalist, and that my parents' generation had wasted their time saving freedom and prosperity which they handed on to me after a long and cruel struggle whose privations and griefs we can barely imagine. Well, all I can say, it's very courageous.